It's
Yeah.
pecan.
All right.
It is 5 p.m. My name is Mayor Pro Tem Kimberly Holiday. I welcome all of our friends, our family, and our spectators to our work session for May the 13th, 2025. We will move to our regular agenda, and we have a joint work session with the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2026 through 2030 related to drainage, facilities, parks, transportation, reclaimed water, and wastewater projects. Once they have quorum, we will call their meeting. Oh, it looks like they are all here. Jonathan, if you would please call your meeting to order as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Holiday. I would like to call this evening's joint work session for the Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 5:01 p.m. We do have a quorum on this side of things. Thank you.
Perfect. I will go ahead actually and turn the meeting over to you. This is item 2A on the work session agenda. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll say a few things and then let staff take over with some of their input as well. So this is, again, this year's update to the capital improvement plan that's been clearly in the works for a few months now. It is, of course, a hefty read. I think I wanted to point out a few specific improvements, even just to the way that the information and data is being presented that we worked with staff to implement this year. You'll notice more prominent callouts for things like, we'll say, alternative funding sources, so that it's much easier this year to see which projects we're going to be pursuing other grants or federal and state, low interest loans, etc. So I think that's a really nice improvement to the presentation of it. You'll also see that similar to last year, all of the projects are mapped back to the Aspire strategic pillars for the city, whether it's infrastructure, safety, resiliency, etc. The other big new addition, just in terms of how the plan is being presented, is also we have some proportional graphs for which projects are in play within a given category. So we're hoping that that makes it a lot easier for everyone, us as well as residents of Pflugerville, to better understand where the investments are being made across this capital improvement plan. So really happy with the work that went into that. Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this unanimously in our prior meeting. Since this is largely an incremental update, I'll let staff speak to some of the specific new additions to the projects. There were a couple that we discussed in the Planning and Zoning meeting and review of this that we wanted to point out. So specifically, the police substation on the east side has been revised to a land acquisition for next year in 2026. I believe it's listed as a $4.3 million land acquisition. The capital improvement plan last year actually had the full scope of build out of that proposed police station built in, but that's been taken out and it's a little bit more focused now. So I think that's a good discussion point. The other, I think, pretty important addition for a new project that we spent some time discussing was essentially a backup resiliency fiber network for the new wastewater and water treatment plants. So that is basically the project being proposed is to install dark fiber that is not connected to the internet in order to maintain a better security and resiliency posture for those new facilities, especially on the east side. So I think that's a pretty important and good project to call out. That was one of several of the new ones. Any other commissioners wanted to speak on some things? Yeah. All right. One of the other changes that the Planning and Zoning Commission proposed and that staff implemented as well was on the parks side of things. So I believe last year was the first year that there was a set amount being proposed for trail improvements and expansions. And in our conversations with park staff, we decided that while we really liked that approach, those dollars obviously go less far, literally, on the trails every year. And so we have built in each successive year a small escalation in the price just to keep up with inflation so that our investment in our trail network can continue to be as robust as it has been. So that was another recommendation that we made that staff was able to implement in this year's update to the plan.
What's your inflation escalator?
I don't recall off the top of my head. Do you?
3%.
3? Yeah, 3%.
Not.
Yeah. So that's pretty conservative.
Any other city council have any other questions?
Oh, there's going to be some.
This being my first meeting going over the CIP, you guys present it, we have questions, or are any other projects going to be discussed? Or is this only just a question?
If you all have specific questions, staff can certainly walk through those pieces. We're really here because we took the first feedback and drafts of this and worked with staff on some of the prioritization and the way it's being presented and communicated, those types of things.
So they have the first stab at it. And then from there, they're here to convey their thoughts, issue concerns, anything they have for us right there. Additionally speaking, staff's here to answer any specifics regarding nuances. As Jonathan said, there's not too dissimilar from what we've done previously, and there's some nuances with that. But since it's your first time around, yeah, I know you. Have at it.
We can start. We have a full presentation for you that might help.
Oh,
answer
okay.
some
I
of those
didn't know
questions.
that. That's what I would
Yes,
love
ma'am.
to see the presentation.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for that. So tonight we're here to talk about the 5-year CIP with the main focus on fiscal year 26. The presentation will cover the definition and purpose of the CIP and how it aligns with the city's Aspire 2040 comp plan and the foundational basis used developing the projects. We'll also walk through the major program areas and the projected schedule for implementation on those. The CIP is a strategic planning tool used to guide the city's investments in infrastructure such as transportation, utilities, parks, and public facilities. It is designed to prioritize projects that support growth, maintain existing assets, and enhance quality of life. It's important to note that while all projects included in the CIP are identified as potential needs, this does not guarantee they will move forward. Project advancement depends on several factors, including available funding, community demand, project readiness, and coordination with external partners. While we maintain a steady and balanced capital program, circumstances often change. Costs can increase as projects move through design, and timelines may shift, and funding mechanisms play a key role in project delivery. Additionally, the CIP may look a little different next year, as several major master planning efforts are currently underway, including those for transportation, water, wastewater, parks, and facilities.
I love the disclaimer, Abby.
These plans help shape future priorities and may result in updates to both the types of projects we pursue and the timing of their implementation. To support the implementation of some of the projects shown within the CIP, staff anticipates bringing forward a 2026 bond program for council consideration. This would serve as a critical tool to help advance the key infrastructure investments. Tonight, we're not requesting any formal action. This is a presentation only for discussion. And as Jonathan said, we have taken this document to P&Z and they have recommended approval of this. And with that, I'll hand it over to Cindy Bro.
So what is that capital improvement plan? It is mostly projects over $50,000. And there's many different types of CIP projects. They range from updating our streets for improved mobility, to improving our storm drains, to expanding capacity to provide clean drinking water and collecting wastewater. The capital improvement may also include investments to build or rehabilitate buildings such as fire, police stations, and recreational facilities. The critical long-term investment plan to help support our economic vitality and promote livable neighborhoods is what this is all about. The projects include planning, studies, design, construction, and they vary in length of time. We refine this annually over a 5-year span. because of so many things that are changing. So project costs are updated to account for inflation, cost escalations, changing market conditions. We are updating to reflect scopes as they are finalized and project is making its way forward closer to start dates. And per the city charter, we're bringing this to you to be included when you're approving your operating budget in the fall. This aligns with the Aspire 2040 plan and the strategic plan. And the Aspire 2040 comprehensive plan was visionary, developed through community engagement to determine goals and aspirations by our city to express public policy and initiate projects. And the strategic plan reviewed and chooses projects based on the 4 pillars that are shown. They must be diverse and equitable, fiscally responsible, environmentally sustainable, and community-oriented, as well as safe and healthy, and provide the economic opportunities for all in the city. The capital investment improvement programs are 2 basic areas: the general fund, which is transportation, parks, facilities, and drainage. We haven't touched too much on drainage, so I didn't make a bullet there, but it's there. And utility funds, which are reclaimed water, water, and wastewater. The capital improvement implementation, we provide high-quality, safe, and efficient public infrastructure from our CIP implementation by identifying and planning the citywide capital needs over a 5-year horizon. We're ensuring the design of projects meeting the intended use, operation, and maintenance plans, and they're complying with regulatory requirements. And the city staff or our representatives manage the construction of these projects for on-budget, on-schedule deliveries.
Just to be clear, Cindy, when you say city staff or your representatives are managing the projects, even if we have somebody there that we've either exported, for lack of a term, part of the oversight, it still falls on us and we still have staff involved on this.
Yes, we do. We do have our nice little consultants, though, like Tom Benz, who helps us a lot on the side there. So project selection, when we're choosing these, it's designated to plan, prioritize, and coordinate the capital improvements project that will meet today's needs as well as those of the future. And those projects are based on, as Abby has said, the comprehensive plan, master plans that we adopt every 3 to 5 years. A lot of those are up for renewal. Infrastructure condition reports, citizen requests for service, and the growth and development. We've got many funding sources. These are just a few that we've got listed up there. I would encourage you guys, when you have a moment, read the narrative at the front of this plan on pages 5 through 13. It summarizes everything for you about the information. This is a lot of information. It just kind of gives you a basic summary, tells you what we consider funding sources right now. We've added a few this year that we hadn't had in the past. And it'll give you some more insight. So we have COs, certificates of obligation, GOs, general obligation bonds, federal grants, the WIFIA funds, which have helped us so much in a lot of the water and utilities area, the TERS, tax increment reinvestment zone, impact fees, CAMPO, Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. We've been able to use a lot of those areas for funding.
Cindy, I'm not expecting for you to know this off the top of your head, but if you can get the information, how many of our GO bonds have been in the fall?
Have been in what? I'm
In
sorry.
the fall, November election.
Do you know?
I don't know.
No, I'm just, there's some legislation going on, so it's something to
think
keep in
most
mind.
of them
Yeah,
have
moving forward.
Is it percentage-wise or is it
Well,
numbers?
they want to make it 100%.
Uh.
And so I'm just thinking, is that even something that's even applicable that we need to worry about? Because from what I remember, I'd say the majority of them have been in November.
I don't remember any May bond
Yeah.
elections in the last 10 years.
There was supposed to be one in May 2020, but then it was deferred.
And remember, we did that because we had a timeline, but yeah. And we wanted to do it right.
Overall, we've got 118 projects in this request. That's like 2.3 billion over a 5-year period. There's the breakout by the categories. So 13 of the projects are water, 440 million, etc. On that, that's about the same number of dollars as last year, but I think it's a few less projects. So we've closed out some. That's good news. General fund is drainage, facilities, parks, and transportation. And I'm going to show you guys a graph shortly. But this is 82 of these 118 projects, which is 69% of the overall. But it's only 59% of the dollars included. And the next slide here, this breaks out the entire general fund 5-year program. So you can see future debt is 64% of that, meaning we've got to figure out as we're going how we're gonna cover all that. And we've got things out there that we can use, we just haven't implemented yet. I guess that's all I've got on here. And I guess we'll turn it over now to Evan to talk about these general fund transportation drainage projects.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. So transportation mobility, what does that all include? Well, in general, it's roadways, traffic signals, and intersections, and we have about approximately 45 transportation projects that we'll kind of go through and highlight a few of them. This is just kind of give you the list of the extensive workload there is, all the projects that we have in play. This is one of 2 slides. This is the second slide, and these projects that are highlighted, I'm kind of going to go into a little bit more detail. Intersection control along Olympic Drive. So this is to review several areas along Olympic Drive where signal warrant analysis is needed to determine whether there's a need for traffic control installation, and that may be needed, and that includes Olympic, Heatherwild, East Olympic, Oxford, Sailors Valley, Wells Branch, and East Oxford and Dessau. The FM 685 at Steeds Crossing project. So this project adds an acceleration lane and a deceleration lane to accommodate turning movements from 685 from the residential area, so it'll increase safety a great deal.
Evan, I want to clarify that. So the 685, you're not looking at a intersection control. There's not going to be a light or a stop sign there. You're just looking at adding lanes northbound, one before the intersection, one after.
Yes, sir.
For acceleration and deceleration. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Continue on to highlight a couple of these. So County Road 138 at Derby Day. This is a project that's a partner project between Wilco and the city. It's about 90% complete design. And we're currently working with Wilco on a couple of items to move that one closer to construction. That's with working with on an ILA and utility item that we're clarifying. Then the FM 685 138, that's just west of that Derby Day 138 project. This is in the very early stages, but this will also be a partner project with Wilco we're working towards, and we have continuous conversations with them. And then the third one, the downtown mobility improvements. So when we talk about efficient traffic flow and look at ways to maintain the traffic flow, we have to look at different innovative ways to achieve that. So what we're looking at is evaluating roundabouts at Railroad and Pecan, Railroad and Main Street that will be going through into the new downtown east property. And then we're looking at an intersection on the northern end of the downtown east property called Driveway A, is what we're calling it, and looking at the feasibility of a roundabout there so we can make sure we can maintain traffic flow in consideration of the downtown east development. So those are things coming up, and we're actually working on that stuff now, having the conversations.
Evan, I want to give you all a lot of credit for the Bermuda Triangle that is 685 and 138, given there's 5 different entities at issue there. I know part of the concern was how quickly stuff can change because of Hutto's ability to fund some of those projects over there on their aspect. Has that changed, or is it Williamson County still essentially funding what they're doing from their neck of the woods?
they're essentially, my understanding is they're still essentially funding what they can do on their end. Yep.
The county.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But HUD's the one that they need to start paying for some of that stuff.
On the slide before. Oh, I get it. The intersection, I mean, I guess that was just a one intersection, but I see in here traffic signal system improvement implementation. Are you talking about that elsewhere, or can I ask the question?
That's in one of that. I'm not highlighting that project,
okay.
But what that is optimizing the infrastructure that is the signals. So things we have done recently, like Syntrax mobility. So updating software and technology to maintain efficient flow. There's different technologies. So the traffic intersection improvements kind of speaks to the technology improvements which increase the traffic mobility.
Does that also include any roundabout, filling those in and replacing traffic lights?
So there's a separate, let me see if I can find it real quick.
That feels like an intersection improvement more so to me than.
So I had a
traffic lights.
specific intersection that I wanted to ask about.
Which intersection was it?
Pfluger Farm Lane and
Pflugerville
Pflugerville Parkway.
Pflugerville Parkway.
Because in my mind, when I was on the bond committee in 2020, that was included in the bond, but there's not a lot of details. So I don't know if it still is or what category it might go into.
So intersection design and construction, which is an item up there that is budgeted for FY26, is meant to address certain areas. And I will check to see if that's one of them.
It is.
But there is funding allocated for us to look at design improvements and construction of intersections. I'll double check.
Thank you.
Though.
Yeah, I think that's at the top of my list. Also, do we have anything in here related to the 685, 130 copper mine area, additional lanes, bridges, U-turns, anything
Yes.
like that?
Yeah,
Where would we see that? How much do we have allocated for that?
It's TR 2010.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have that. It's on the
Copper
first
mine
page.
number 6.
Number
The
6.
sixth.
I think, if I can count.
You see it?
Yeah.
Number 6.
685.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, there it is.
2.3.
2.3, almost 2.4.
Okay.
And the project cost 3.6. And that's projected today's dollars or when it actually gets let?
Today's dollars.
Today's dollars?
Well, this looks like they're planning to spend all of that money next year.
Okay, and my apologies, I may have not
I don't
conveyed
know.
this well. So almost the 2.4 for what Councilmember Weiss was talking about, that's 2026, so that's today's dollars. But the project itself costs 3.6.
So
Is that, and we're projecting it out, is that today's dollars 3.6 or when it actually gets let?
That reflects portions already spent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so last year in the CIP, there was an extra column in this schedule that said spent to date or something to that effect.
Okay, I'm not
and then
crazy.
the deed,
Okay.
yes, because when I looked at it, it was like 000, and then there was a project total.
Okay.
And my math brain, I'm like, this isn't adding up, and you're making me do mental math, like where's the missing dollars? So, and last year there was a column that was in there. So I don't know if there was a specific reason to remove the historical information, because I feel it's very important to see how much has been spent on a project, also to give idea of like how long the project has been happening, whether it's an ongoing thing or if there's something delayed, or I don't know. But I would like to, it's in the details, like for every project, but it's not in the summary. And so I think to close that gap of having it roll up, that we should add that column back.
Yeah, if possible, because it tells the story. It's just
We don't want to be Travis County.
It is important to know that if
No,
there's
I'm
a
agreeing
project
with
that's
you.
been out there
I am agreeing
that
with
hasn't happened, right? I mean, there.
Absolutely.
So we need to.
Yes,
That
I
helps
am.
highlight that. My other question was on the project numbering. Does that have something to do with, like, I'm looking at 1903, 21, is that like the year it was added? Like 2019, is there any sort of naming convention like that that tells me historically when did this project first come on our list?
No, it does not. It was originally intended for that, but it has evolved to something else. And so the project numbers are for us to identify them on maps and things like that. We can incorporate in the future and look at how we can include that information in the document, maybe included, added to the fiscal year CIP in 2025 or something to that nature.
I would love that because again, it gives, an overall, how long have we been working on this project? And if it's been a long time, do we need to pay more attention to it, or what are the delays? And knowing about that and having the public know about why something might be taking a long time is good to, so they're not complaining about why isn't this happening, then we have some explanations.
Yeah, to Councilmember Weese's point, part of the problem is that, and y'all know this, right? Like, I mean, we understand that we want to be judicious in when we're actually going ahead and issuing these bonds just for tax rate purposes and honestly what we can handle economically in-house and what we work with. But at the same time, folks do want to know, like, dude, you have this bond from like 2020. What's up? Like, why did that happen? And as long as, y'all know the story, you know what's going on. It's just conveying that narrative to other folks they'll understand that.
Yeah, I've got, I think, one more question for Evan. I've got some general questions I'll save till the end, but one intersection that I'm not worried about yet, but will be very shortly. Colorado Sand at Lone Star, that one, I think, once we get Colorado Sand built, that's going to be a mess. Is that on the radar?
No, I'm taking it.
Yeah, there's a design that's complete for East Pflugerville Parkway expansion from Colorado Sand to Weiss. And they would address that intersection.
Well, no, I'm talking about north of
no.
there.
Like-
So Colorado Sand and Lone Star, I can't remember, if it's Lone Star Ranch, Lone Star Park.
Right.
The one
What's
going
Lone
into
Star?
Falcon Point off of Colorado
Oh,
Sand.
It's on the other side. It's
Yeah, halfway up.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'm going to take
I'll make sure we look
Yeah,
at that.
I mean, right now, there's not traffic going through because Colorado Sand isn't built, but once it is, that's going to be very similar, I think, to Pflugerville Parkway and Pfluger Farm Lane, where we need to get some traffic control over there as well.
Okay.
So those are my two main transportation. That, and I'd love to see us put a Texas U-turn on 130 at Copper Mine. I think that would alleviate a ton of traffic.
Yes.
Yeah, so hopefully that's in that 2.3.
And just to
That's
clarify,
your budget.
Copper Mine is the bridge?
685, yeah.
Okay, where 685 goes over to, okay. Where you go straight and you're
Yeah.
going to Hendrickson?
It's 685 crossing the highway, but it's
Yes,
Copper
'cause
Mine
that-
after the highway.
That
so-
is
Yeah,
very narrow when, during school time. When
yes.
people need to-
Or
Yeah, work.
alternative
I was about to say, I think
Every time, I
ingenious
guess.
scenarios to improve
don't people
traffic.
take their own pathways in that area?
Well, if we had the U-turn, it would help relieve the Kelly Lane and 130 intersection because we do go that way to avoid that, but then you get stuck at that light.
Yeah, and I know
So-
there are some folks who are turning left from the right lane, and even though some of the left lane's going straight, we need to improve things. We need to improve flow right there real quick.
May I ask about that same type of U-turn at the Heather Wild 45? Is that anywhere on radar?
It's a 45, the Heather Wild in 45.
Yeah, because there's a
Yes.
lot of accidents because they're going over that bridge, at a high rate of, like, there's been a lot of accidents, like, right in front of living spaces. And if you had that U-turn, then a lot of those could be avoided.
Yeah, we have a project that's a State Highway 45 on and off ramps that we've been working with City of Round Rock as a partner.
Yes.
There's some things we're working through so that we can do that.
Do we have?
I didn't know if that was separate from, because there's a whole issue with that frontage road and stuff, but just like the U-turn, is that something that we have to work with TxDOT, or is that something?
U-turn's unfortunately part of the text doc.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do recall. I believe that was included in the ramp reversal and access road extension project. I would be curious. Is the ramp reversal, or the ramp realignment, whatever we're calling it, there on 45? Is that finalized, or is that
It's
still
not-
in review?
It's not finalized. We have the engineering proposal to design it.
Okay.
And then we've been meeting with Round Rock So that partnership is there. We're just working at a higher level, trying to get. There's a revenue loss fee.
Indeed. No, I'm more worried at this point, and I think we discussed it when we had a presentation on it prior. But I really want to encourage us to find a way to have an exit ramp that gets people to Heather Wild, that gets people to the properties that are along there. I think that's going to be a crown jewel opportunity for development in Pflugerville, as long as we have legitimate access. If that exit ramp isn't until after you get past all of Pflugerville, then it's not gonna develop as nicely, that's for sure.
So he's so much nicer about it. Yes, that opens up a whole new, revenue stream and opportunity for businesses and opportunity for the community if, in fact, we go about that way. So I'm glad to hear what you had to say. You said an engineering proposal, which makes me wonder how long ago was that proposal?
It was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, that's what I was worried.
Do you want us to fund it?
That's part of the conversation, like what are they prioritizing and everything else. Because
I mean,
because I think that
I want it shovel ready.
We've talked about our corridors, 45 and 130, and
I say
that,
even if I won't be nice this time, even if TxDOT is extorting us for $30 million, eventually it needs to be done. Whether that's I don't think we can say, we need to put it on we need to postpone and not spend any money on the design because we're worried about spending that money. We know we need that improvement. So one way or another, it's going to get done, and we need to be ready. I want to be shovel ready on it.
I mean, he's right. They're holding us hostage, and the frustrating part is that our community's been hurting for that. And you just asked, just in innocuous, makes perfect sense. I'm sure people go up to that U-turn all the time and like, wait, what the heck? It's not even finished. Yeah, blame TxDOT.
So to clarify, you're talking about an off-ramp on 45 to the north side? That will,
I would, to the westbound access road. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in my opinion, with my crayons and my map, right? I'm going to tell you that there should be plenty of room with the abandoned toll facility right there to get a lane off and onto the access road, and still have room to still get people onto the access road at some point in there.
I was going to say you use map pencils, not crayons.
I was thinking.
Yeah, I got
a big chief pad.
big chief pad with the big crayons.
Can
I got the kindergarten
ask
crayons.
a question about this Schultz Lane safety improvements and what that includes?
Yeah, so we funded some Schultz Lane improvements. Originally, we were talking with the developer, but I think we now have been discussing just doing it on our own because we have the funding to do so. So that's, I don't recall the actual design details, but
I thought we were moving forward with a 3-lane cross section on Schultz Lane to help alleviate a lot of the contention over there.
Yeah, because that's very bad
David,
traffic
that's
over
why
there.
you're-
And then also the new,
Yeah,
what's the,
It's the one.
the
Grand Avenue.
No.
New Meister.
New Meister,
Kenny Fort.
Meister.
Kenny Fort, the
yeah.
Kenny Fort push through.
Yeah.
It's like, I can see it.
Yeah. David, you've been complaining about that since you
I was
got
gonna
on.
say.
Well, because we have it built on both sides, and that now when they actually opened it the way they did, where they took away the protected right, everyone on Schultz turning onto 45 Frontage Road, it is so much more bad. It's like worse than when before they had it opened. And so if we could have Kenny Fort opened, or I was just wondering what can be done to Schultz, or is that is it further away from?
I could have sworn
because it's old.
they worked with Round Rock and Kenny Ford to that portion. And I think there's a TxDOT aspect to that from there. But to your point, and we got to give David credit on this. I mean, that's a Jerry Springer show we hear about for a long, long time, and I think it's only gotten worse in that area.
I think for Kenny Fort connection, we've got some private property crossing there, don't we?
I think we've got, but I think
we have rights already.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Do we have traffic control authority on the access road there at Schultz and 45?
I'm not sure. I would have to double check.
Okay, because I do know, I mean, they took down some of the barriers that they probably shouldn't have taken down. I don't know who took down the barriers that I don't think they should have taken down. So we can do some, as I say, solving problems with paint If we can
Yes.
solve that traffic problem up there with some bollards or something to provide some access to the street.
Yeah, I mean, they would get knocked down. I mean, they would put new ones up and they get knocked down. But the ones on Pecan and over by 130, they're still looking nice. So maybe we could have some, I don't know
We replace
why
them.
the other ones, but
As drivers get more
we do replace them.
frustrated, they
Yes, they're
take
like,
more
"Let me
liberties.
through."
So if we can eliminate the frustrations
Take
or at least
more
reduce the
liberties.
frustrations, we can save the bollards.
No, you're absolutely correct about that.
Yeah,
The
it's
bollards in front of
bollards.
the HEB over there get knocked down all the time, and a lot of replacements of those. Of course, that's a Round Rock problem. Right there.
Those.
not-
are you
that's
on
not
Gaddis
in-
School?
Yeah,
Or
that's
or
Yeah, Gaddis School.
Louisiana.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But yeah, if we could finish that Kenny Fort push through, it works so much better now that it's finished on the Round Rock side. Moving north up to Kalahari and up to the ballpark is so much easier and faster now.
It's shocking how
So
much
it's a
time
straight
we could
shot
have-
and it's super fast. And if we can get that through on our side, it seems to me that opens up, as Councilmember Metier suggested, a lot of additional commercial opportunities, and also makes it easier for our people in Pflugerville to get to those amenities that are regional in nature.
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
And
I
to
don't
get
know.
back home.
what?
And to get back home.
And to get back home.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we can do to accelerate that, but that seems like that should be a pretty high priority item.
I know that is highly developer driven, so we will work with our development team and kind of see.
What does that mean?
They're supposed to build it
Oh, yeah.
on their
That's what I
timeline.
understand.
I get it.
But
I'm like, explain.
I like how you said highway developer driven. Okay.
we will work to push that.
Thank you.
This map is, as we've been discussing, but this is just to provide context that are within the city footprint. This map. Now talking about drainage.
Sorry, I did have one more question. On the pavement maintenance program, on those streets that get resurfaced, how long is that resurfacing supposed to last?
So,
Because I mean,
You're
because
gonna bring it up?
I am
Okay, go ahead.
yeah.
anyway.
So
It's-
that is-
in my neighborhood, I was like, it doesn't even look like it was done, and I can't remember how long it was ago. Maybe 4 years. So I'm just curious.
There was
It's
there was a recent or somewhat recent resurfacing.
Oh,
that-
okay. There was a.
Yeah, that
So
has-
that's not normal. I just want to say
That's not
what
normal.
is normal, because
Are we talking about HA5 or?
I don't
think
know.
that's-
I'm just
yeah.
talking about in Highland Park North. It was resurfaced, and it looks like it was like not done. It didn't last very long. So I'm just wondering, in general, how long do we expect the resurfacing to last for these streets that we're redoing each year?
So we try to do that every 5 or so years. And that's actually an item for consideration tonight too, to do this fiscal year's preventative maintenance. So the product is called HA5, but it's a mineral bond sealant that we put in the road. And what it does is it seals the asphalt, because the number one killer of roads is moisture penetration. So what that does is it seals the road so that penetration can't undermine the roadway and deteriorate the subgrade. So it's nice and pretty at first, and of course it wears out because it's a sealant liquid that we put down, but we try to do it every 6 years.
Okay, so every 6. So then we're gonna every 6 years, all of Pflugerville is going to at some point
It
get
should be.
every road.
Yeah.
In the
We
neighborhoods.
go around and you do it to roads that, when you do an overall condition index, or you do every 4 years, 3 or 4, we'll do a citywide roadway condition analysis, and it identifies which roads are good condition, fair, poor, and that sort of thing. So there's only certain candidates that can be where that mineral bond sealant or that preservation can be applied. So it's only like roads that reach the good grade.
Okay.
And with the idea of you're investing early in good condition roads, so you avoid that higher capital cost later. But yeah, we try to do the entire road, and we do it methodically.
Okay. Well, that makes me
Or-
feel better. If it's only a 6-year life, then after 4
Yeah.
years, then that's expected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So talking about drainage, we're going to touch on a couple of key drainage projects here, 12 to be exact. These two highlighted ones, I'll kind of go into more detail about these, but so these, and there's 4 other ones. I'll talk about these first 2 first. It's Emmanuel Road, Pecan, at Upper Gillen Creek channel improvements and the downtown district storm drain improvements. So these 2 projects, we've applied for grant funding. That grant funding would assume 80% of the design and construction of these projects. Is paid for by the Texas Water Development Board Flood and Infrastructure Fund. And we should soon, so second quarter of the year, so by August, we should hear if we receive the grant. That'll greatly help us achieve these goals. And then there's 4 other projects that I wanted to point out. The Caldwell Elementary at Upper Gilliland, Wise Lane at Wilbarger Creek, Railroad Avenue at Upper Gilliland, and Hidden Lake Drive at Wilbarger Creek. We've also applied for what are called PER grants, or preliminary engineering report grants. And we're waiting to hear back about the status of those. And in early 2026, we should have heard back, or will hear by then, and we'll be able to apply for a full application for grant funding. So talking about alternative funding sources, we're utilizing that to try to move these projects forward. And then again, this is within the context of the city, this map relating to drainage projects. And then talking about facility CIP.
Actually, could I make one more comment about drainage? I think there's actually a pretty good story there on some of the projects that have been completed, specifically to get a number of residential houses out of floodplain over the last few years. I think this plan has around 100 more households left, basically, that would be at a 10-year or better flood risk. So I think that's a really positive story for the city, right? That we've actually corrected a lot of drainage issues the last few years. That's taken homes out of as much risk as they were.
And and I'll give credit where credit's due. Councilmember Mike Heath brought that up years ago. Those are enough. Give him credit.
So does the homes that are in the floodplain, do they have to have flood insurance?
Mm-hmm. And the city does a good job of sending out the brochures. I've gotten one that tells you, dude, you live in floodplain, here's some insurance. And remember, flood insurance can only be issued from the government.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So facility CIP, as you all hope are aware, we're doing the facility-wide master planning. That's evaluating our current use of facilities and looking at space needs. Does the facility really support the function of the organization or the division for which it is located? Kind of looking at these different things. This map kind of shows you all the different projects we're working on. And then kind of going into some of the more detail, looking at Downtown East, City Hall, obviously our Public Works Complex, and then looking at our ADA transition plan for our current facilities. We're doing facility condition assessment, which is complete. And then we're working on projects that have come from that, so allocating funding towards those. We discussed the East Police Substation. The reason for that is, as you all know, north-south mobility is good within the city relative to the east-west connection. So the East Police Substation is a need in order to provide service to citizens or maintain that service level.
Where are we looking at for that substation?
That I'm not sure. I think we were looking at potentially by the new Public Works complex, maybe. I think that's what I heard.
So do we have data on the calls that are...
New Public Works complex.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have data on the calls that are in the area that we're trying to expand service to, and what is the response time now compared to other areas that are more centrally located?
We'll get that. We have looked at response times, et cetera. I don't know the minutes offhand. We'll get that.
Yeah, just a little bit more detail on the substation there.
God bless you.
The other question I have on that is this a spacing issue that we have at our current location, or it's just a service issue, or both?
I think it's more of a service issue, and maintaining continuity of services is a space issue, but I'm not entirely sure. I think in the terms of needed space to maintain service level, as the city grows east, this will be a necessity.
I know we also have Justice Center expansion on here. How much are we expanding for the, what was it? $2 million that's in there for the Justice Center expansion.
That I'll need to work with Chief O'Malley to really understand.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
We've got $2 million for Justice Center expansion slated for 27, 28, and 29. So the question is, how much are we expanding this facility? And I assume we're also going to be converting this room eventually.
Sure. And we've got some preliminary plans for it. It's remodeling, like whenever court moves to City Hall, how do we use this as a training room? Because court will move out. So it's this, and I believe that there's quite a bit of remodel.
I mean, this is labeled as expansion, and I think this building was originally designed to have the courtyard filled in.
Yeah, it was actually not the courtyard per se that I understand. But this
originally,
area,
I don't know that it's actually feasible.
the part that's a grassy area that the public doesn't see, that's back that direction, the north direction, that would be the expansion.
So many years ago, when we were looking at City Hall being moved, and this was one of the areas we optioned to because we have that option with all that land back there. So, okay, is that going to include the issue that's been plaguing this building for over 20 years, the air conditioning?
Yeah, if y'all want to detour between meetings, it's about 85 degrees in the EOC right now, and it smells like feet. It is a miserable building. And we continue to band-aid this building, but it is miserable. Or it's 20 degrees. It depends which day. Yeah. I may exaggerate slightly, but it
makes no sense.
It's in bad shape.
I thought we just replaced the mechanical here.
I'm not going to agree that solves the problem. Again, field trip at 6:58.
Okay.
If y'all would like.
Absolutely.
It's up to Melody.
We also have a facility master plan that's ongoing that'll also be able to really speak and nail down the intention and use of this building with the new one coming on board. So.
And our condition assessment, I assume, will help with that.
The facilities, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hand it off to Jeff. If there's no more questions for me, he'll go through the parks CIP.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. My name is Jeff Shea. I'm the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. So I'll run through our 17 park projects that we have on our CIP. And you'll see we sort of run the gambit on, these are some planning projects, development projects, ongoing in construction and soon to start design. We've got several on here, and for sort of purposes of time, we'll cover the three that are highlighted there. That are set to kick off in FY26, and I'm happy to answer any questions about other projects as well. So kicking off in FY26, we've got our Lake Pflugerville Park Phase 2B, what we're calling Phase 2B. Set to start design in FY26. This is essentially the second part of the same phase as Lake Pflugerville beach expansion, hardscape expansion on the north side of the lake we discussed earlier this year in a lunch and learn. So this includes a boardwalk, additional parking on the west side of the lake, and then future funding includes nature center facility along with this, classrooms and some lawn space and minor improvements to the Bealey House.
So Jeff,
property.
we're breaking ground on this?
This is design.
Okay, it's design.
This is starting design, correct.
Jeff, on that, I'm a little curious or confused, maybe. So we've got 10 million in the CIP for Phase 2B, but then we've got another 5 million for boardwalk area and pier replacement. Is that the same boardwalk area? Is that additional to cover gaps in the original plan, or?
That should be the same boardwalk. Let me make sure I'm looking at the same thing that you're looking at. We should have.
I mean, if you go back a slide, I think it was there.
Just one slide. Just one slide. One slide.
Yeah. Right there. So highlighted in blue there, you got Lake Pflugerville 2B, and then the second one under the highlight is the boardwalk area.
Boardwalk Empire.
And pier replacement.
Yeah, so that's a separate phase of the of Lake Pflugerville expansion. So phase 2 is actually all told.
Well, no, phase we've got phase 2B and we've got the boardwalk area, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to Councilmember Wise's point, are we expanding the boardwalk?
I mean, why do I have a boardwalk phase 2B project and then an additional boardwalk project? Feels like that should probably be one big project.
Yeah, we'll look at this. Let me get some answers for you on that specifically.
Sure.
Don't have that in front of me right now.
If you want to make the boardwalk bigger, we're fine with that.
What's
But-
phase 2A?
Phase 2A is what I mentioned earlier, which is the beach expansion and the.
Oh, I thought you said that was
the
2B.
hardscapes. That's 2A. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So phase 2, all told, is north side improvements, and then some of those west side improvements, the boardwalk, some of that nature center area, and then the Lake Pflugerville Silent Harbor Trailhead is somewhat a portion of that because that's also on the west side. Includes the addition of 40 parking spots, a small restroom, and then obviously trail accessibility for folks that may be driving in to utilize the trail on the west side that doesn't exist currently.
Oh, okay. That's where the piles of DG are currently being stored?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, sorry, I cut through there on my walks.
Yeah, so we'll make some improvements to that.
All right.
You're so wrong.
Third project that's going to be kicking off in FY26 is our trail corridor study. So this is obviously really important to us as Trail Capital of Texas and what will be designated shortly, hopefully signed by the governor as Trail Capital of Texas. And this is taking a look at our Gillen Creek Trail corridor from essentially from Bowles Park or the current recreation center to about Windermere Park. This is our most used, probably our most important trail corridor in the city. So this is going to plan amenities that are going to be programmed in that area along the trail, specifically near downtown East. So taking a look at not only the connections and how people, get through there for transportation, but also what recreational amenities will expand access and use of that area. So we expect to see some future CIP items to come from this study, since that's such a highly used area.
What's our deliverable from that study?
So it'll be essentially a master plan for that part of the city. So we're looking at
what I really want is, I'm going to call it a transit map of our trails, and I want to define, wayfinding, and our trails should have names, and we should have intersections, and you should be able to get from one end of the city to the other by using those, even if it's sometimes on street, sometimes off street, sometimes trail and creek.
Absolutely.
I want that transit map that identifies the pathways across our city.
And I will say on that, we are currently working on a wayfinding plan for our trail system, something that we're going to get into implementation immediately. So as the Trail Capital of Texas, we've got 60 miles of trails across the city, and we have some voids in our wayfinding signage. So we are working on that currently. I think that absolutely could be a part of this plan, and that's going to be especially with downtown East, that's going to be an even more heavily used trail. And so making sure that that's not just those names of the trail corridors, but it's also telling you how to get to the recreation center, city hall, all those things will absolutely be part of that.
So are you telling me that if I put this in my Google Maps and I say that I'm going to walk, it's not going to tell me
It'll tell you
the fastest way to go on the trail?
It'll absolutely tell you that currently. Now, it won't necessarily have what that name of that trail corridor is, but it will tell you largely. And we're actually working with our GIS department to make sure of that currently, and also to add some of our more popular trail corridors onto All Trails, the app, if anyone uses that when you
No, that's good to know, because to both of their points, I mean, we want to utilize this as another modality. I think that people, when I don't think people are cognizant or think of it that way, but we are a multimodal city, and there's a reason why we actually extra large our sidewalks to accommodate bike, as opposed to having the bike lanes and everything else that go in from there as well. But people, just like you said, if they're looking for roads or wayfinders to go to different places, they may not be cognizant of that or aware of that. And if it doesn't pop up on Google Maps on how to do that, then they're like, oh, well.
I'm trying to figure out from my new home how to get over to the Windermere Park where the new mural is, where we've adopted a spot. And I actually want to ride my new little Bluebell bike over there. So I'm going to test it out. Is that a ride?
Yeah, somebody needs to ride bikes here, but I don't know.
That's going to be a ride. Okay.
Yeah, it's not an easy process, but if you come across any situation where Google's not telling you how to get there via the trail, let us know.
I might lose 2 pounds. So.
I think somewhere on the agenda tonight, y'all are getting an update on the 5-year strategic plan, and I know that mobility plan and map and giving branding and culture to neighborhoods and parts of the city was a pretty big pillar, if I recall, from the early report of that too. So I think there is a larger issue there or opportunity for us as part of that plan as well.
And I don't know if this is part of it, but even before all the maps and all the technology pieces of it, I noticed that there are signs that just need to be replaced that have really good information on it. And so I would suggest that we look at some of those too.
Absolutely.
Just for those.
Yeah, that's part of the plan we're doing right now. And so hopefully we'll have some updates on that very soon. And so here's the map of where those are located. And I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Oh, stop.
She has Melody.
Oh, I know. We'll be here.
So the Lake Pflugerville Phase 2 was on the 2020 bonds. So is this 2A and 2B the phase that was part of the bond? Or is there additional things in this 2B?
Phase 2A and 2B were funded from the 2020 bond.
Okay, and then my other concern is just how much longer it's expected to take. Because it's already 2025 and we haven't touched.
For that generally, for all of Phase 2?
Yeah, because Phase 2B is going out another 3 years.
Yes. So we're about to kick off. We've got a few other bond projects that we're either just starting construction on or bidding out right now. The next project that we will be starting design on is Lake Pflugerville Phase 2A. These will work fairly in conjunction with one another, especially since that timeline is now lining out. Our plan, like this says, is to get started with Phase 2B design in FY26. So both of those will be in design, starting that process within the next year.
Because I don't remember the Nature Center being on the bond and it's not highlighted here.
Right.
So was that added?
So that was part of the 2019 preliminary design report for Lake Pflugerville. That was not part of what was bond funded, and so that's in our CIP as kind of a future phase of that project. Currently, like I mentioned, it's the Phase 2A, everything there, beach expansion, hardscapes, additional play amenities, and then Phase 2B is that boardwalk, additional parking, and then some minor improvements to that west side of the lake.
Well, okay, because then that's 10 million, so.
Correct.
It just seems like that's a lot for Boardwalk and Nature Center. But I don't know how much the Nature Center is, and that was added.
Yeah,
But,
the Nature Center, so the Nature Center based on the PDR in 2019 was, I believe it was 5 million.
Yeah, I would like so why is it segregated that way? Like the boardwalk can't be part of 2A?
I'm not sure. I think that happened based on when those funds became available. I think we do have the opportunity to probably put those projects together if that's what council would like to see. Like I said, now that timeline seems to be sort of running together a little bit more than I think it was planned to. I don't think that there'd be anything stopping us from sort of putting those phase 2A and 2B
I think it just
together.
makes sense, their point, because we're talking about a boardwalk. People are going to ask, wait, didn't you just do a boardwalk?
Sure.
What's going on? You know.
Well, I want to accelerate, the boardwalk was part of the bond, the nature center was not. And so I just think the boardwalk should be part of the bond funding that we should be focusing on now that we're 5 years after.
Yes, and it is. The boardwalk is part of the bond fund.
Well, it's just the grouping of it.
Yeah, and I'd say this about the nature center. One of the things that we've talked about numerous times is that Lake Pflugerville is one of our most underutilized and highlighted gems that we have. So I think adding that area is another, notch in what we're doing, particularly if we go ahead and get the legislation that we want to have Project Greenfield out there too as well. I think that adds to another asset and enhances what we have over there. Jeff, I do have a question about, I saw that we have 2.3 million waiting to get a land acquisition, I think 20 acres or so. So is that something that we have in mind? Is that something that we have like in the pathways? What are we, speculation?
Yeah, so it's a little bit in speculation still. Okay. So there's essentially two, I think, projects that could be tied to. Okay. One is when we officially determine when the destination play space, or when we determine where that will be, that land acquisition money may have to be utilized to acquire land for that space. Okay. If we're able to find a space for destination play that's kind of within our park system already, we're conducting an athletic field feasibility study right now. So they're identifying parcels that may be good for athletic fields since we're short on a lot of those. And so some of those funds potentially could be used for athletic field acquisition. And that's supposed to wrap up in the next couple months.
Okay, and so and Shane's sitting in the back right there, so he's hearing this too as well. What I'm about to say is this. We're looking at the allocation, because we need more, sports space. I say soccer space, Caesar's going to disagree. But, and we're looking at the allocation of fields. Can we also look at reconfiguring what we're doing regarding our pods at 1849? Because I feel like we could utilize more space than we superficially created these pods with these gates and all those other things right there, as opposed to saying, well, maybe we can fit some more of these fields in this space, if
so long as they're not soccer
for as well. All soccer fields. Soccer fields.
Sure, absolutely.
I was thinking about it particularly. When I was out there for football at the football game not too long ago, and I was like, man, why don't we utilize the space we have for football? We have all that space, and it's like, okay, why do we have these fences over here? We just have a fence around the area. That's one thing, but we go from that.
So, going back to the original point from P&Z about having annual trail improvements and just having it every year, I'm going to go back to my undeveloped parkland, where we have parklands that neighborhoods have been waiting for years to have a park. Where does that live on this schedule?
Where's this neighborhood? What neighborhood do you have in mind?
It's on New Meister and Spring Trails, but there's a number of other ones.
Okay. No, it's just so people know.
Yeah, so the trail improvement CIP, they're a little bit smaller projects that are trying to fill gaps and things like that. We do have a capital outlay where we replace playgrounds. We've spent some money on some of those, but those are typically replacements. Sometimes they might be a new amenity somewhere. But as far as undeveloped parkland, we're at the point now where we're finishing up that 2013 undeveloped park master plan. A lot of those parks have been either constructed or are in about to be constructed or in design, where we should be finishing those up very quickly. So I think we are going to have to undertake that process again very soon, so that we're identifying those spaces. It doesn't live in the budget in the same way that the trail improvement CIP does. So we take those sort of, right now we're working on Kelly Lane Park and the Murkison Park. And so those were, instead of living in one line item, those were, taken as individual projects. I think that's the tact we would take on developing undeveloped parks.
I guess I'm just disappointed that we're 12 years out and some of those parks are still undeveloped. And I'm seeing new things on here that, are new, and we're not addressing the things that have been outstanding for a decade. And I'm just wondering, when we place our priorities on where we spend the limited resources that we have, why all of those things aren't being included in the conversation so that we can have geographic equity.
What do you consider all of these things?
Well, all the parkland that we have that's undeveloped, there is a lot on the map that I looked at when I was trying to find one of the parks that was getting a replacement. There's a lot, and it may be old, but some of them are still. When on the 2020 bond, it was only maybe 40 or 50% of the parks that were actually studied and had a design, a conceptual design. Only half of them made it onto the 2020 Parks Bond. And so those designs are there that they could be brought forward and put onto the CIP. And that, I'm just concerned with a project for a 1 acre park for $5 million when you could do 5 parks and finish that out for the same pricing, and at least it should be listed as something, because we're not even considering it in the next 5 years. That's what we're saying.
So I guess to me, when I think about it, I think of a couple things. So living, when I used to live in your neighborhood, I remember specifically our previous parks director talked to me about creating, I still call it Highland Park Park. I know y'all call it Will Park. It might as well be called Highland Park Park, okay? That's what we call it. Because we had all that parkland that was underdeveloped. And it was like, hey, listen, but we have an opportunity now to do something big. We've been working on these other things because they're going for the highest and best use where they can leverage their resources on things. Where I live now, we have, and just like you said, a whole bunch of area that's undeveloped right now with it as well. But what we're doing, and this is the way I look at it, is like, okay, where are people traveling? Where are they going? How are they working from that? Because I definitely get the equity argument, because you're like, wait a minute, I don't want people traveling too far away to have to go to a city park. I don't think that's happening right now, but I'd like to see the information you have on that, for that. But I do know that there's areas that people traverse all the time, just like the Mayor Pro Tem talked about where she's going, in these trails and everything else. So where you get your higher and best usage of your money, it's like, okay, we're going to put it in right here, and we'll work down from that. So maybe it's not, you can chew gum and walk at the same time, so we can look at both. But I understood why sometimes you're going to prioritize something right here as for that. Heck, me. I'm still upset that Seal Road got kicked out of that bond in, what was it, 2020 or 2018?
2038.
No. What was the bond? What was the bond?
I don't know that Seal was ever included.
And she was on the committee.
But I'm just saying, we're looking at this 5 years out, and it's not even we're not even considering it 5 years from now.
I'd like to ask, though, is it a need? Because I remember one time on this dais, it was before I came on, my predecessor was arguing that there was a park right across the street from his house, and the council at the time was thinking about adding some funds to that park. And he said, I live right across the street, and I never see a kid in that house, or in that park, and I will fight this tooth and nail to not fund money for that park. So, and you might remember that.
I remember him saying that.
Well, that's an expansion of an existing park.
My thing is there a need to fill these parks right now? And if there's not a need for it, then why spend money on it?
How do you know it's not a need if we look at the data that Shane has provided about what percentage is within a certain walking distance of a trail or a park. So the percentage that is not within 10 minutes, there is a need. And so if we think that is a good goal, then we're leaving out the 15 to 20.
I think that's an assumption. That's saying that percentage that is not is that there's a need. You're assuming that there's a need because of percentage rate.
So there's parkland that was dedicated for a park. The neighborhood was expecting a park.
Might I suggest, if council's direction is that 100% of all residences are within a 10-minute walk, that's a policy goal, I would suggest that we do that another time than today. Currently, we have very few, I don't have the exact percentage, but there's very few households that are less than a 10-minute. So it's a policy decision on how much funds you want to put towards that percentage. If your goal is 100% within 10 minutes, and this is a valid conversation, I would suggest that we take this separate and move on.
So Serena, could you get us that information to figure out? Who's
Sure,
in the 10
happy to.
Shane
And it depends how fast you walk. I've seen some of y'all walk, and it's
Shane came and sat
kind
down.
of slow.
Shane did.
I can go back, no problem.
He just wanted to show off his muscles.
Go ahead.
No, I think with the equity thing, we've definitely flipped playground age. So I think if you live in a spot where a playground was older and the only people getting newer playgrounds were coming in through development, that's no longer happening. Undeveloped and developed is an industry term. Not every acre of land that we have will be developed. And if we developed every acre, that doesn't necessarily mean all of them would be within a 10-minute walk of a park right now, because we have some land currently that we could have potentially developed, whether it should be or not, and it would still be outside of a range where there's some play deserts. As far as the undeveloped master plan that we did in 2013, every one of those parks are either complete or moving through completion, whether design or a construction. And so, like Newmeister isn't on that plan. So if you want, I could just start winging the undeveloped land that we have and start just assuming I could maybe put a playground or a trail on it, but without engineering and planning and other people who are way smarter than me giving you a more thorough explanation of what does and doesn't and what ranking, you would just be going off one staff member's opinion. So we've worked through that plan. We do believe we're probably due for a new undeveloped master plan. But I think there's the difference between undeveloped master plans and developing or improving the plans, the park system that we have right now. Old Town Park is 20 years old. And so do you wait until every acre of land is developed before you put any more money into Old Town Park? I think like Councilmember Matera said, you got to be able to do both.
No, and you just reminded me, so you said 2013. Did we have lights on Heather? Was Heather Wild still a 2-lane road? Like, I'm trying to think when we
I wasn't here in
built out.
2013.
When did we build out Heather Wild?
2015.
20. So
2012.
That was about as podunk. I remember.
2012.
I know Kelly Lane was 2012.
It was 2012.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember driving around the cows and there was no lights on. So if you think about when that plan came out, like, it was just a completely different city.
Yeah.
Most people didn't even know that Heather Wild used to look like that.
Okay.
Least of which Weiss.
I think the question that Councilwoman Ryan was getting to was whether or not it's more important, and this is a policy question, for the council to say, we're going to spend $5 million on a nature center, or are we going to spend that $5 million on developing parks in play deserts? And that's a legitimate question. I do think that Shane's idea of planning it and the idea of making it similar to what Jonathan suggested, part of an annual thing, just like we look at, we're going to add certain amount of trail every year, add certain amount of park improvement every year, and make that part of the ongoing planning process. That seems to me to be a reasonable way to move forward on this. Having grown up in West Austin near the Nature Center at Deep Eddy and seeing how little use that got, although there were people who were very, very enthusiastic about it, it got very little use. I wonder if that's our best use of that $5 million is to build that thing that, in my experience, got very little use, or is it better to build 5 more neighborhood parks? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's a question.
Where do we do that prioritization? I thought that was done with the CIP process.
Me too. Yeah, and just because you said it, I can't tell you how many times I've gone with my own kids to that same nature center and some other ones over there as well. And those are heavily used and utilized right there as well. How oftentimes are we talking about people, again, we're trying to make this city not a place where you just can go ahead and walk through, sleep, put your head down, and everything else. What are you coming here for a destination for? I know people from all over the region who come to our lake. I know people who are shocked by the beach, besides by the lake. So the amenities and the things you put for that you're highlighting, that's the reason why we're doing Project Greenfield over there, is going to help utilize and better leverage those resources from that as well. Again, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Well, you can't spend the $5 million twice.
Well, you can't spend the $5 million twice, but what you can do is looking at 3.5 and then 1.5 on something else and seeing what that goes from that as well. And that's what you look at those pieces that go for there. I always hate it whenever we try to act like things are so black and white when it's realistically it's usually gray.
Well,
and we're putting Brandon to sleep over here, so we probably should move on.
Once the money is spent, it is gone. So there is a black and white element to it.
All right, Brandon, you want to proceed?
Sure. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. So to close this out, we're going to go over utility side of the 5-year CIP. As you all are aware, the utility fund is comprised of a variety of funding sources, whether it's Texas Water Development Board, WIPIA funding. We're pursuing other grant funding through the Bureau of Rec. We have a wide variety of funding sources throughout the CIP to fund the significance of the CIP. So to kick us off with reclaimed water, so reclaimed water being purple pipe, we're pushing towards the eastern side of the city's water CCN to be able to serve with purple pipe, to be able to really hit our large volume customers. And this CIP that we have has 2 current reclaimed water projects, one that is currently underway, and the second one that will be kicking off in FY26. So the plan is to be able to serve that Weiss corridor, which is our eastern CCN on the water side. So reclaimed water line, just to give you a pictorial of that would extend all the way up Weiss Lane to be able to serve a variety of HOAs and parkland all across that is currently served by potable water for irrigation needs. And to give you another just overall view of how those 2 reclaimed water projects, as you're aware, the 5-year master plan expands on this, but this is in order to kick the entire master plan off to expand that customer base to make it more worthwhile for the city and for those customers as well. On the water side, so the potable water side, we have 13 water projects, of course, to increase drinking water capacity, as you're aware from two of the big three projects, and expand transmission and maintain existing city infrastructure across the city. The FY26 water CIP, nothing much has changed as far as the last time you saw this, outside of everything's been moving forward as intended. The highlighted project there is the 5 million gallon per day State Highway 45 pump station. That is to serve that growth corridor along the north side of SH 45. To be able to serve those with potable water for those high-density developments. We've already owned that property. We just have to kick off design in FY26 for that project. So a little bit about that again. It's a 5 million gallon per day pump station and a ground storage tank. Long-term, we'll potentially need an elevated storage tank in this area as well. But this is to be able to serve that northern corridor along SH 45. For a pictorial of where all of these projects are, as you're all very well aware, there's a lot of water and wastewater projects going on across the city, across our both water and wastewater CCN. So this is to give you an idea. We have a lot of new transmission pipelines that are either in design currently or in construction currently or about to go to bid. We also have rehabilitation projects across the city that are in design or currently moving forward to rehabilitate aging infrastructure as well. On the wastewater side, again, as you're all aware, we are increasing our treatment capacity with the building of the Wilbarger Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility. That's one of the large big 3 projects that we have currently in construction. A lot of our CIP is to expand our gravity conveyance across the city, so a lot of interceptors, decommissioning a lot of lift stations across the city, minimizing the city's risk across our entire sewer shed to be able to serve the Wilbarger sewer shed and the Cottonwood sewer shed that goes all the way out to 973. So the FY26 CIP, a lot of these are currently in design as far as the ones that are on the board here. The ones that are highlighted here are ones that are intended to kick off design in FY26. One of these is a developer-funded project that we have a cost share allowance for throughout the Lakeside Meadows development. And then we have the 12-inch club wastewater interceptor as well that will be able to take off the club lift station that is on South Heatherwild Boulevard to be able to serve that growth on the western edge of the city's wastewater CCN. So again, two large projects, again, very expanding our conveyance capability to defeat gravity as well as decommission lift stations across the area.
If you don't mind me jumping in real quick on the
Yes, sir.
overall wastewater plan here, I think it's really important to point out as well that I want to say it's close to 70% of the funding for this are through funding sources that actually save taxpayer dollars, whether it's the WIFIA funding or the Texas Water Development Board. So that's, a couple $100 million plus of these projects are using those alternative funding sources. So.
And the city, to add on to that, we also intend to fully keep moving forward with exploring that funding as much as we can. The state legislature has made it very, very, known that they are investing into water infrastructure across the state, and we fully intend to take full advantage of that where we can to be able to save ratepayer dollars as much as possible. And to provide a pictorial map of where all of these projects are, again, large conveyance projects that extend for long geographical miles across the sewer shed, as well as rehabilitation projects throughout older parts of the city to be able to renew 40-plus-year-old infrastructure as well. And with that, that's essentially the utilities. If you have questions for me, if not, I will kick it back to Abby.
All right, so here tonight is just a schedule of the CIP adoption. Again, tonight there's no action, it's discussion only. 1 year of the CIP plan will be adopted with the annual budget, and so that will be done September 9th. And that is all that we had, unless you had other general questions.
Oh, I had questions for Brandon, but he was smart enough to hand you that.
I've got two general questions, but you have something for Brandon first?
No.
Okay.
I'll talk to him offline.
So I believe I've got two questions. Hopefully it doesn't turn into more than that. But I do want to let you know I really appreciate the funding sources table that you've included here, starting on page 14 in the book. I found that to be really handy. And I'm curious, when it comes to the future debt, are any of the items identified under future debt already approved, or are those things that we will be seeking approval for in the future?
You mean that 64%?
Some of it is already approved through the 2025 CO bond that's gone through. We just haven't closed on that yet, so it was listed as future debt.
Okay. And then I'm fond of saying, disappointment is unmet expectations. I'm looking at this fiscal year 26. We got $585 million in projects. I think it's $360 million of that is future debt. Are we going to be able to get all that done, or do we need to be more realistic with our schedule? I'm always worried about actually meeting our commitments here.
That was my same question, because in 2024, in the CIP, we only completed 36% of what was budgeted in the CIP. And then the next year, for 2025, this year, we doubled the budget of what we were only able to achieve 35% of the 2024 budget, and 2025 was doubled. So do we have any information about how far, what our projection is of what we're going to finish that was budgeted this year?
You knew she'd bring receipts.
I don't mind audacious goals, but I want to make sure that what we're doing is achievable.
So we do review this every year, and to look at what we're going to spend and where that project is in that point of time. Unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball to be able to tell if we are going to get caught on something such as right-of-way or utility relocation, or working with another entity that may delay the project that we thought would have kicked off construction, but now we're working with TxDOT on a AFA with them, and so that would slow that progression down. So we are aware, and we do try to sharpen our pencils every year to get closer to the mark, to know where we are in every project. But there's so many factors on that.
So maybe a better question to ask this. Well, let me say this before I ask my questions. So we have 64%, that's future debt that we have to figure out what we're doing for. You said part of that allocation specific that we have not closed out on some opportunities for funding models, and you just wanted to make sure that that wasn't coloring the picture that we saw, correct?
So the 2025 CO that was recently approved by council, that hasn't closed yet.
Okay.
So
my apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt you. For that, maybe you can make it a different color just to show, hey, listen, this is what a percentage to show from that. But for your purposes, and I guess for our purposes, for us to set up our expectations as we're talking about here, I see she's looking at you all the time. This is the practice. This is the normal practice procedures for your industry regarding this. So we are not out of line. That even though we are looking at a specific percentage that's done, that's roughly been around 35-40%. That's not dissimilar from what usually happens in the industry regarding that, given all the various different factors at play, right?
Yes.
So consequently, even though we have that expectation that we hope to go ahead and get that done, that may not necessarily be the case because of the issues and concerns that happen with the fluctuation of all these things. We all know for how many years we had a fight regarding the utilities on
Can I answer
Kelly
the question?
Lane and working for that. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, I'd like to address the question. The question at hand is about FY26. If you'll remember, FY26 will be heavy loaded in facilities such as Downtown East, Public Works Complex, Will Barker. I'm more confident now than before that, yes, we will be hitting those. Thank you.
There you go.
So just for clarity, if, when we have a large amount of CIP that's in the budget, we are taxing the residents for that, and if we come in under budget, how does that affect the tax rate when we have a large CIP that we say we're gonna spend this money, and then we don't?
So it's not all tax rate, it is some user rates. And so if you're asking the question, can you change a tax rate mid-year? No, you may not, but we address then every year on an annual basis of what that tax rate will be. So you'll see those savings as carryover into a general fund. If we're talking taxes, then we're going to talk about the general fund, and you'll see that carryover, and we'll show those carryovers very clearly in the budget process.
Okay, I'm just concerned that if we're always overestimating what we're going to be able to achieve, then that we're overtaxing our citizens every year. And then whatever we don't achieve also goes into the next budget possibly. I don't know if that's the case, but that's my concern.
And Serena, that's where I thought she was going, and I don't think that's the case.
I think you're solely looking at CIP and not the rest of M&O and debt. So if you're looking at an overall tax rate, because it takes both to make a tax rate. I can analyze those numbers for you. I don't believe it is a fair statement to say we overtax people.
So I think maybe an easier way to put this is that even though we may not be meeting what we have in our CIP that specific year, that does not mean that our citizens are carrying the burden, the financial burden that goes along with that.
I guess it depends. If you have borrowed the money and then it's not being utilized, then that would affect our debt rate of, paying on money that hasn't been converted into assets or to improvements in the community.
I think that's more of a finance question than a CIP question, but it does go into the timing. If we are overly aggressive with how much we think will get done, we have to issue that money sooner. If we issue that money, I always say I don't want to earn interest. Because if I'm earning interest, I'm not putting that money to use. And I would rather be investing that money that we're issuing into the community. I think that's the point. And I want to make sure that our projects are paced out and we're not overestimating how much we're going to get done, which means we overestimate how much we need to issue and pace that out.
Yeah,
absolutely. We issue as we go, and we've gotten a lot better at it.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it doesn't. That's what I was going to say to your point. I don't think it sounds like that's what's happening here.
All right, got it covered.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right,
good.
Thank you. Thank you. Planning is.
Thank you all
for being here. Do y'all need to close out?
I'll adjourn the Planning and Zoning Commission joint session at 6:28. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I need NASCAR changer.
All right, our next item is the Strategic Action Plan 2026 to 2030.
Now I'm gonna have to go remember and find it. See, I don't have my big thing. It's like not already. I gotta download.
Yep.
We'll be back.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Tonight we're bringing forward to you an update on our 2026 to 2030 strategic plan. Since kicking off with you all in January retreat, we've gone through several community meetings, and tonight David Bureau with Future IQ, our consultant for our strategic plan, is here to provide you that update as we're completing the community side of it and working towards that final report for your review in January.
Okay. Evening, Council, Mayor. So great to be here to give you an update from our previous discussion. So when I was here last time, I was sharing with you the data that was coming out of that sort of exploration of where the community wanted to go. And we've had that survey just closed yesterday, and that data stayed firm. So people have got that aspiration to lean into that connected community, leverage opportunities from a development trajectory. Since I was last with you, we've been working on how do you get there? So starting to think about the plan development. And I was here just 2 weeks ago, and we held a whole series of focus groups, met with community members, staff. We had another meeting with the Youth Council, and really starting to get community's input into what are the ideas that could help propel the sort of the strategy or move towards that future direction. So I want to share the sort of working action items that we've been developing, drawing out of that data. And I'm just to be clear, there are still working items. You know, we only just pulled all that data together last week from the focus groups, and we still have work to do, obviously, to validate it. But I wanted to give you a look at it so you knew what was coming. And we will be inviting you to do a prioritisation survey as well. I think it's important for you to be able to kind of give some indication of a set of actions that the community's brought forward as what they see or what they would like. What do you think are the ones that are, the immediate ones off the rank and so on?
David, has there been any surprise change in the projections you conveyed to us previously?
No. So I was going to show you that actually. So this is now, and it's actually now about 560, but the data did not move. As I said, I thought it would say solid, and really we're seeing that same concentration in that upper right corner on both the different ways we asked the question. So it stayed really solid, right? So I wanted to sort of launch from this, the strategic pillars, which is what we went through last time. These are the 6 focus areas that were identified from the work with the community. And that's, those topics that you can see around community and neighbourhood character and mobility infrastructure and connectivity and so on. I think just listening in on the Capital Improvement Program presentation, I think there's some really interesting synergies between what they're talking about and what the community has been identifying as what they'd like to see. And I think this strategic action planning process also adds another layer of sort of appetite from the community in some of that work. So I want to go through this with you, the 6 pillars, right? So there's just 2 slides in each pillar, really simple stuff to look at. I wanted to just give you that high-level look at it. So the community and neighbourhood character one, I think this is a really interesting thread. I've been struck by how strong the community and the community fabric and the kind of sense of belonging, how strong that is in this community. I mean, it has come up in every session, and it's one of those, I always look for what's the connective threads in strategic plans, and this is certainly one of them. And I think it leads right through to the brand, actually. The slides that I'm going to show you after the introductory one for each pillar, in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see I talk about a key theme. I think that sort of pulls out what's the sort of the essence that people talked about, and then there are 4 actions under each one that start to organise the ideas that people came forward with. The key theme on the community and neighbourhood character, people are really excited about Pflugerville as a community offering its really unique sense of place, as I said. And there's a very powerful narrative about trying to activate the vibrancy of this community, not just a place where people sleep, right, but where there's music and there's festivals and, the sort of beating heart of a culture. Very strong connection to nature, and people exuding a very powerful sense of belonging. So the actions that people identified that we've drawn from the engagement, as we group them up, the first one is about strengthening the existing neighbourhood structure and associations. I think this is about scale. So as a community of 70,000 people, you can kind of get lost. I think of people very connected to their neighbourhood, and I think there's a lot of room to run in terms of helping build the neighbourhood sort of structure and the associations in those neighbourhoods, giving people a way to sort of talk about things at a local level. The second action there is sort of a way to kind of expand on those neighbourhoods. I was surprised the number of times people talked about finding creative ways to identify neighbourhoods in a sort of a visual way, you know, like that they've got an identity, that there be certain artworks in different neighbourhoods, or people even talk about wrapping utility boxes, and you know, maybe they're kind of like butterflies or different, you know, there was a really creative kind of discussion about how to develop these identities and be able to really foster that. So I think that's a very powerful sort of a community building element. That leads to the third point, which is some of the actions really sort of came together around this idea of not only do you have the sort of the association structure and you have this identity, but you really start to build that's the sort of community activity interaction, you know, this idea of community-based events and neighbourhood building activities. You know, people talked about, you were talking about parks and things like that. You know, people were talking about, you know, sort of doing things in their local parks and sort of the community building activity. I think that could be a very important programming role going forward. The fourth action in this one is a little bit more of the kind of rules and regulations. So there was a recognition that there's perhaps a need to refine and strengthen ordinances that maintain the appeal and aesthetics of these neighbourhoods. You know, it's one thing to identify it, but then you want to be able to ensure that you're able to perpetuate that and that you don't have any sort of aberrations occurring.
Is that us or their HOA?
Yeah. Yeah, in some cases that's it, right? So, but I think those sort of models are very powerful and people want to see more of that. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar, this again connects to the capital improvement program, I think in a very nice way, about mobility infrastructure and connectivity. This whole notion of connectivity has been very strong in the discussion. There's a lot here that talks about building off the trail system, so I think there's a recognition that the trail system and that branding of the trail as the trail capital of Texas, you know, really has resonated and sunk in with people. The big key theme here is that trail network is highly regarded, but I do see people see a bigger opportunity to expand and connect that trail network, and I think also importantly to activate it. And the capital improvement program doesn't really talk about activating the kind of the social and recreational side of it, but people through this process have. So the first action, expand and connect the trail network to create a full multimodal backbone. I know you mentioned you're a multimodal community. People would just love to see that, what you were talking about. They want to see that map. They want to see how they can get from where they are to another feature or destination in the community. There's a big appetite for that.
And if I could just real quick
please.
on that, David, is that also on the agenda tonight is our mobility master plan, which does start to articulate that multimodal backbone that's reflected not only in our CIP, but in this plan as well.
Yep. Thank you, Emily. The second one here is about activating that the trail network with a recreation and social connectivity. And there was a lot of commentary and interest about the idea of not just having the physical trail and you think the job is done, but actually very intentionally activating it. And people talked about having, you know, pop-up coffee shops there, and you know, little festivals and little trailheads, and you know, really encouraging people to get out and use that system, but also making it a social connection and hub. So again, I think that's a really interesting overlay on the physical component. The other two elements here are quite different. So Action 3 was about developing a road master plan, and this was particularly pointed to the east side of Pflugerville. The thinking on this was, and it ties actually to the future development patterns, is that, you know, and we heard that in the discussion, there's, what was it called, a highway developer-driven model or something, right? Is people, the suggestion was that the city and the council should take a much more active role in developing a master plan on the east side so that you get to control the road network. You get to design that, and then is what will guide development. So rather than being in that reactive mode, which is we've talked about before, we're being in that very proactive mode and really thinking about that road master plan and all those off ramps and all those issues, so that you're guiding the development to where you want it to go in the way you want it to be. And I thought that was a very interesting action.
You know, I always get very concerned because I'm a unicorn from Austin, the separation between the East and the West.
Yes.
And it's really important to me that that does not happen here. So I am hoping that when we talk about a road master plan for the East side, that it includes a lot of connectivity, easy, so that it doesn't become separate because of physical barriers.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is.
Let me mention something here. The social connectivity role of trails, I think, not only applies to trails, but it applies to roadways, it applies to sidewalks, it applies to everything. I lived on the west side of 130, and the social connectivity was a lot better than it is on the east side, or at least on my part of the east side of 130. Recently, well, not recently, but we incorporated a bistro area in our front yard and recently put in some furniture so that our neighbors could stop and visit. Neighbors don't visit in my neighborhood. And I think that's one of the things that I think is important to social connectivity.
You know,
That's good.
that's a good point, because I think I hadn't thought about, and I guess David said it, and that Emily, I was thinking maybe you can find examples of this, is that how to activate these trails, how to activate these communities. If you have some interesting things, some you know, for example, I mean, I know you're gonna laugh, but like that basketball soccer court that we have over there, you know, in that specific area, like that's unique. That's something like, hey, that's going to attract people to come and get out and come around each other, just like what you said about the parks and work from there as well. But how do we build things in neighborhoods that will make people get out of their house because it's like, hey, listen, this is really cool. I'm interested in this, and I get to meet my neighbors while doing that on there. The way I looked at your action 3 is that we actually have a chance to develop that area that we sort of develop on the west side. But the irony of that is just like what the mayor said, is on the west side, you know, you do have more of that connectivity. On the east side, you have all that land. Now, the legislature may ultimately just stop what we can do, to be honest with you, you know, out there from annexation purposes. But how do we cultivate that specific area to go that, particularly given the fact that a lot of those things include roadways that we don't control, that, you know, that we'd like to push forward and have more people involved in that, but
I think what you'll find is in the mobility master plan that you'll see this evening, you'll see a lot of additional roads, and they'll cover that. You'll see more of that connectivity happen out east. Now, of course, that's dependent on legislature working with the county, but without identifying that, we won't move it forward at all. And so I think we're starting to address some of those things, and you'll see that this evening as well.
Have you heard of the turquoise table? So it just came to my mind, what if we had the green table where there's community champions, or, you know, in different neighborhoods, that you know that you're welcome to go sit in the front yard and have a conversation. It's a connecting point to the neighbor's point.
Yeah, and I think that sort of comment, we heard a lot of that, is that there is this appetite that people would be really open to intentional community building. And I think that reflects that people want to be here. They may have to go away and work at the moment, but they want to build a home and they want to build a community.
And I don't have to tell you that you're welcome, because you know that table is there.
Yeah. All right, and then the last one, this was the other part of this mobility infrastructure and connectivity was, and it's part of the activation as well, this idea of being able to use small sort of smart city infrastructure to have kind of interpretive locations that, you know, there might be a mural. So what's the story about that mural? Or there might be a certain neighbourhood identity or something. What's the story? And using that sort of QR code and those type of smart technology pieces to be able to activate that. Like, people felt that could be more of that sort of connectivity, social building.
So with the the Death Star Part 2 bill, that's coming. I don't know if you guys know the hearings tomorrow. That may inhibit a lot of the things that we're trying to do here too.
Yeah.
You trying to get me in a bad mood?
What time is the hearing?
9 a.m.
And this pillar 3, the community amenities and
No, I
events.
think 8.
This picks up a lot of what we were actually just talking about, which is part of this activation. There is a sort of an overlap between the pillars, as you would imagine. And this talks about how we can sort of create that vibrancy and so on. The big theme here, as I said earlier, that people see enormous potential for this arts, culture, food events, bringing this vibrancy and sort of stimulating local talent. There is also a feeling that could be part of the destination appeal of Pflugerville, and we cover that in another pillar as well. The actions here, obviously activating the revitalised downtown as a truly unique destination, I think is going to be really important. And I know Emily and her team are doing a lot of work on that. People did talk about that they wanted that, they want to see that kind of domain type experience, that sort of walkability and that kind of, sort of those connection points in the community. We didn't get very far into where they would be. Obviously the downtown becomes part of that, but we were really at this point just looking for, what's the kind of ideas that people would like to see that sort of coming into fruition. People talk about cultural destinations, and in fact, interestingly, the Youth Council talked about museums and zoos and things like that. There's a lot of kind of sort of creativity around that.
Multiple times.
Multiple times, and even in the survey,
Well, there's not really a zoo that close. Well, I mean,
So
it's
are we
a big
utilizing
Animal
animal-
loving.
rocks
yes.
Yeah.
with the QR codes on
The
it?
Brewster's right next to
Who's
the
getting those?
library.
I was wondering
which one?
who's getting the
Soon they'll be
rocks
chickens.
with the, I got a rock with a QR code that leads me to all of the art activations.
Yep.
Who's getting the rocks?
The rocks go in the rock garden in the plaza. The ones with the QR codes, we had a handful of to pass out for that. But otherwise, when people paint rocks, they come and put them in the plaza there between City
Y'all know
Hall and
about that,
Hammers.
but how about a rock to go on a scavenger hunt around my city?
That's a good idea.
So I know where the art activations
Yep.
are, all of them.
Well, and that's really Action 4. I mean, people talked about these smaller scale mobile sort of pop-up events and festivals, that creative things like just exactly like you're talking about, but ways that get people out of their home, get out connecting to people, and so on. People obviously talked about recreation facilities for youth and adults. So that's the third pillar. The fourth one, residential node development. We talked about this previously. There's a fair bit in here about sort of trajectory of infrastructure and so on. The big key theme here is that the pace of development over the next decade is going to reshape this community. I mean, that's really on people's minds, and people are in two minds about that. It's exciting to see happen for some people, and some people are concerned about how that turns out. Careful planning is going to be required to ensure the development occurs the way you want it to, rather than it running you over. So the sort of action areas that people talked about, just to is what we were talking about, the suggestion of thinking about an annexation strategy for contiguous land on the east side. That's a very particular issue, and I know there's a lot around that, but what people were pointing to was that, just doing some thinking about that and sort of identifying priorities. And the feeling was that there might be some people who are outside the city limits who don't even realise they're outside the city limits. And so like really having a more intentional strategy around that.
I don't know. Pillar 4 seems to me is something that I would dare to say we all want, but is much harder to achieve than I think the residents believe. Annexation, encouraging that mixed-use development and, comprehensive housing, all that stuff is something that's nice and that we all want, but I don't think people realize how hard that is to achieve.
At least,
Yeah.
At least the good part is that all four of them we've spoken about through the years.
We have,
and we've had
over and over.
conversations about all of them.
Yeah, and these actions, you are right, they're tougher, but these are all on that vertical, the development trajectory, and that's the one that I think people are most concerned about, and where they're wanting much more intentional guiding of development as opposed to letting market forces dictate.
Right. And again, what's frustrating about that is that the power keeps getting taken away from us more and more to be able to effectuate what they want here. I wish we can just take this slide and show it out then or down the Capitol.
To no avail.
And it could well be that, I mean, it's on people's minds because they're aware of those issues, right? And
no, I don't. I wish
not as much as you.
Action 4 may be more achievable, the design guidelines
Yeah.
versus
We've done
annexation.
a little of that
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
Well, I think to the mayor's point about the bistro set, right? And how do we require or encourage neighborhoods to develop in a way that create those nodes?
I think what's interesting.
I've seen it in some of the neighborhoods. I mean, if I'm walking around Highland Park on the boulevards, or if I'm going through Falcon Point, each little section has its own neighborhood name and neighborhood feel, and it seems like those we still maintain that cohesiveness.
We have, I have not been the biggest supporter of this developer, but I give a lot of credit that we put in a lot of information and intent in the Lennar Cameron Road subdivision.
No Meadowlark?
Yeah, to having those areas, those grassy areas, those other areas that are specific for people to congregate and work at, that allow for that, have those public benches and some other things right there as well. We did the same thing on Weiss, but there's a certain developer who hasn't lived up to his development bailey, so we'll see if that actually gets done. Yeah.
I think there's two issues. One is, how do you get people out of their house to do that with all the TV and the phones and the busyness and all of that? And then there's the second thing is, once they are out and they're interested in being out, then giving them something to do. So one may be easier than the other, just with.
We put a Wi-Fi hotspot so they can bring their computers and sit outside.
There you go.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are, you're always going to be.
Yeah.
The mayor was talking about his experience living in central Pflugerville and how it's different from living where he lives now. And, one of the things you see in European cities particularly, you see a lot more of this, people interacting with their neighbors. Well, why? They have smaller houses and smaller lots. And you see more of that in Highland Park, where you have smaller houses and smaller lots, and people are closer to their neighbors. It's easier to interact with your neighbor if you only have to go 50 feet than if you have to go to 500 feet. So if you have an acre lot and you have a 5,000 square foot house, that's not nearly as approachable as a small lot and an 1,100 square foot house. And if you've got an 1,100 square foot house, you're a lot more likely to want to go out in the neighborhood or into the front yard. If you've got a 5,000 square foot house, you just go down to the billiard room. You don't need to go interact with your neighbors because you've got all of that space inside. So, the space that people have available to them individually and privately affects how much they want to use communal space.
Well, I think that if we really wanted to have that paradigm shift of people interacting and the social connectivity, you have to want to do that to begin with. And that's something we want to do because we like to be outside, enjoy the trees, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the margaritas. And we can have neighbors stop by and have a margarita if they'd like.
Are you offering?
One of the mayors.
Sure, come on over to 2304 Dunes. But that's just us, and I think there are communities across the country that are that way. And so I think that we've kind of isolated, maybe I shouldn't say we, I think a community isolates itself depending on the social norm, whatever the definition of their lifestyle is. And I'm not sure that that's going to get us there.
Yeah. And I think what we're reflecting in this plan is what we heard obviously from the engagement, and I do think this is a pivot moment that's occurring in the community where I think people are looking more to belong to a community, and there's certainly a desire to build a community here. The last couple of pillars, one around economic and business development. This is that sort of leveraging the strategic opportunity, which we started talking about really right back at the very first session out at the airport. I think what started to come into focus through the discussions is that people are very conscious that we should be leveraging, identifying and leveraging what our strategic opportunity is. It was harder, I think, for people to get to what is that strategic opportunity. It really comes down to two things. One's social, which I'll talk about. People really see the sense of community, and I think that's in the next slide. But people did also start to identify that you've got two very large technology clusters that are developing north and south of you, and you have a very unique positioning in between there, and it really started to come into focus that that's a bit of a sweet spot. So some of the actions that have come up there is a desire to really foster local businesses. That's something that people want to have that capacity for the community to be able to do that, that ability to be able to build on those technology clusters. A regional convention and event centre. Now, the text for that is that people do see that the Pflugerville has the opportunity to have an economy built around destination things and talking about major events. I mean, people talked about hot air balloon events. They talked about, music festivals, all of that kind of stuff. People see that as a pretty exciting economic development potential. And then there is this sort of culture about making sure businesses that are here are a part of the community. That you're not just a location. The last pillar is around the brand and reputation. And this one I think is really interesting. So the key theme here, and this would be a little of what I'd sort of probably offer, is that you're going through a game-changing experience with your development of your rec centre and your city hall and your main street. And I've got to say, I've never seen the gap between what you have and what you're going to have be as large anywhere, right? I mean, it is remarkable to go, and I don't think, it's going to create a lot of buzz, right? It's going to be a lot of talk, because it's going to, it's really quite a fabulous investment and kind of activation that you're doing of a core part of your community. I think that's the opportunity for you to start to think about your new narrative and the actions that come with that. People talked about wanting to sort of initiate a rebranding, really rethinking the story. People talked about wanting to shift the focus from affordability to being desirable, or being affordable to desirability.
That's good.
Create this unique sense of community people see as a key strategic proposition, and then really capitalising on that downtown revitalisation. So they were the actions that came out in the brand and reputation. But there was the sense that you're really on the cusp of something remarkable. I mean, the dirt's being dug, right? I mean, you're breaking ground, right? And it's one thing for people to hear something about it, but when they see it and you start to get all that connection between there and the old Main Street, I think that's repositions you as a community. So that's where we've got to. I just wanted to share with you those high-level kind of actions and themes. Our next step is to build this out. We obviously need to kind of connect this with what's already going on, but I do think it provides a really interesting overlay of what the community and the stakeholders have been saying about what they would like to see for the future.
So next steps will be the prioritization survey for all of you, and then we'll be back before you at your June 24th meeting.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Having no other items on the agenda, thank goodness, we are adjourned.
Don't we?
We did it.
Oh, okay. I was like.